There it goes. Okay. Good evening. This is Rabbi Brovender Parsha Shiur of the WebYeshiva, and we're going to learn the parsha, a little bit of the parsha of Emor, the parsha that's coming up. You see the few psukim that we've written, we've printed out. I hope you could see them. Vayomer Hashem el Moshe. Hashem el Moshe. You remember that in the parashiyot that are leading up to the parasha of Emor, the Kohanim and Leviyim have been designated with special obligations. They become the kind of intermediary in different areas between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the people, who are the other tribes, not Kohanim, Leviyim, but all the other tribes depend on the Kohanim and Leviyim, even in matters of seemingly medical matters, or matters of the good and the bad. The Kohanim and the Leviyim are in charge. We don't still clearly understand the difference between Kohanim and Leviyim. I mean, they have different jobs, but the job of the Leviyim was limited to the desert in the Torah. They were the ones who were in charge of moving things from one place to the other. And the Kohanim were in charge of the service of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that was not done by the people, but always the people represented by the Kohen. So again, Vayom Hashem el Moshe Amor LaKohanim B'nei Aharon. Further kind of reference, Kohanim. There was a world in which anybody could become a Kohen. We know that world as well. But here we're talking about the Kohanim who are specifically B'nei Aharon. So the pasuk says that they have to maintain a special standard, and that standard is lo yitama. Now we may understand that or may not understand that, but we understand that the notion of tuma is excluded. A person who is tameh is excluded in some way or other from the community. But when it came to the Kohanim, the Torah said, "Lenefesh lo yitama ba'amav," strict adherence to a rule. Don't become tameh. Don't associate with the things that make you tameh. So Rashi points out, Emor la Kohanim, you see the Rashi, Emor v'amarta, right? The word Emor appears twice in that pasuk, which is something that the kind of thing that Rashi notices. Emor v'amarta, lazir gidolim, I guess it says al haktanim. Gedolim b'nei Aharon, warn them, al haktanim, here, Gedolim al haktanim, b'nei Aharon, yachol chalalim, the people who for some reason are not able to assume the duties of the Kohen, Talmud lomar, ha-Kohanim. No, only the Kohanim, not the Chalalim. That's why it's an emphasis of B'nei Aharon and Chalalim. B'nei Aharon, Rashi says below, Benot Aharon. The daughters of Aharon do not become Kohanim. Lo yitama be'amav, ba'od she'amet betoch amav. If there's a dead person who is within the nation, Yetza mate mitzvah. Yetza mate mitzvah. This excludes a mate mitzvah, which even the Kohen has to somehow take care of. Second pasuk says, "Ki im l'she'iro hakarov elav." He only become tamei to very close relatives, le'imo, la'aviv, his mother, his father, libno, v'levito, u'la'achiv. Pasuk gimel is la'achot to habetula. It is his sister, his unmarried sister, betula, akrova elav, his close relative, asher lo haita li, she's never been with another man. Lo yitama, that's an exclusion. He could take care of her. The pasuk Dalet says, lo yitame ba'al ba'amav lahachalo, ba'al ba'amav lahachalo should not become tamei. Lo yikricha karcha berosham, shouldn't shave the hair on his head. Berosham upeat zikanav lo yigalchum, and the corners of his beard he shouldn't shave them off. Besaram lo yisritu saret. So you have a list of limits on the Kohen and people that he can deal with if they are dead, and people that he cannot deal with, and certain kinds of care that he has to give to the hair on his head and the beard on his face. So I would imagine that this would be helpful in getting the Kohen distinguished, to know he's a Kohen. He's going to act differently. He's not going to be like we are. He's not going to allow himself to become tamei. All of that is true about the Kohen. So the reason that we're looking at these psukim, right, is because in a manner that is similar to the Beit HaMikdash itself, the Kohanim who we associate with the Beit HaMikdash, but had other important jobs as well. I mean, they were in charge of Tazria, Mitzorah. They were generally in charge of the Beit HaMikdash. The Kohanim who established a kind of a separate group within the larger group of Am Yisrael. The Kohanim are no longer functioning in that way. I mean, we still have Kohanim. There are people who are, the sons of Kohanim are also Kohanim. I mean, they don't have a place to serve God in particular, but they're not particular in their service of Hashem. We're quite all the same. I mean, there's no difference between the Kohanim. I mean, there's a small problem with Kohanim going into hospitals. I mean, if the building is built in a way that being in one place affects the fact that there may be a dead body in another place, and then it becomes a problem for the Kohen to become part of that kind of kedusha and avoiding the tahara. So the book of Vayikra, besides the fact that the Kohanim, that the korbanot, that the sacrifices no longer are instituted, and so part of the book of Vayikra is kind of not so relevant. to the daily lives that most of us lead. But the idea of having Kohanim is also not so relevant. And I think that there's a problem. There's a bit of a problem. I mean, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave the Torah to Bnei Yisrael, and Moshe Rabbeinu was the instrument that produced that Torah to Am Yisrael. You would think that in as far as anything could be long-lasting and necessary, that the Torah would be the source for things that would continue to exist. So if the Torah says that the Kohanim are supposed to determine the state of tsarat, of leprosy, we call it leprosy, but as I pointed out, I don't know exactly what that means. But if it's true that the Torah wants the Kohanim to adjudicate the matter, can we continue with this leprosy, or do we have to uproot it in some way? Do we have to change something? And today we don't have that opportunity. That would mean that the Torah somehow was unclear or insufficient. The Torah didn't say that the Kohanim would be out of business and wouldn't be dealing with the tsarat after 1,000 years. That the Beit HaMikdash would be shut down, and none of these things would be really appropriate except for some negative matters here and there. But what about the Kohanim? What about the Kohanim? So it seems to me, and that Am Yisrael, that we know that Am Yisrael continues to exist in some way, in spite of the fact that we've gone through many tragic moments in our history, and it's often seemed to us that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is, to a certain extent, even though we don't believe that that is a problem, but to a certain extent, HaKadosh Baruch Hu has abandoned us. And in fact, all the modern Hasidic interpreters, that the ones that I am familiar with, at least, are always dealing with this question of, like, why is it that we can't do what the Torah wants us to do? And why is it things that have changed? And in this case, we have an answer. We have an answer. Here we have the Rambam. The Rambam Halacha Hilchot Shemitah v'Yovel, right? Which generally come up in the next parsha, in Bahar. Halacha Aleph. Here's the Rambam. Shevet Levi. The topic of Shevet Levi. So now, what is Shevet Levi? This Kohanim disappeared. I mean, we could watch the Kohanim before they duchen in the shul on important days of the year. Well, in Eretz Yisrael, on every day of the year. So Shevet Levi, Aval pi she'ein lahem chelek ba'aretz, kvar nitztavu Yisrael litain lahem arim lashevet umigrashehem. So the Rambam reviews something that we all know. If we don't know it, I'm going to explain it to you now. Shevet Levi is a special Shevet. On the one hand, they work in the Beit HaMikdash, and they are supported by things that go on in the Beit HaMikdash. It is Aval Pi she'ein lehem chelek ba'aretz. Aval Pi she'ein lehem chelek ba'aretz. They were not part of the division of Eretz Yisrael. I mean, every tribe received from Moshe Rabbeinu and Yoshua ben Nun an area in which to rebuild the Eretz of Canaan, and an area in which they would be able to prosper, but they would not own it. It doesn't belong to them. He says, "Kvar nitztavu Yisrael litain lahem arim lashevet," but Bnei Yisrael were commanded to create a series of cities in Eretz Canaan, and those cities would belong to the Arei, would belong to the Leviyim. Litain lahem arim lashevet umigrishehem. It says the people of Canaan, the Jews in Canaan, were obliged to give the Leviyim a way of life. They not going to get an inheritance, so they're obliged to give them the Teit Lahem Arim Lashevet, cities in which they could live, Umigrishehem, and they would get the cities, and they get the area around the cities that belong to the Leviyim. V'arim heim sheish arei miklat, and we know that there were 6 cities designated in that way. V'alehen shtayim v'arba shtayim v'arba'im. They were altogether 42 cities. That was mostly in Eretz Canaan. Ukeshe mosifim arei miklat acherot. And these cities also served as arei miklat, that if somebody accidentally murdered somebody else, he could run away to one of the arei miklat, and he'd be protected. Arei miklat acherot b'yemei hamashiach hakol l'alviyim. When the Mashiach comes and straightens all this out, then the Leviyim would get those cities. Right. So you see that the first halacha the first halacha that we're going to learn in the Rambam is that even though the status of the Leviyim was kind of strange, all of Am Yisrael received nachala, an inheritance in Eretz Canaan when they came there. They were also all obliged to fight the battle for the achuzah, for the inheritance of Eretz Canaan. The Leviyim, in some way, are excluded from this normal kind of activity, and they didn't have to fight, but they received places to live all over Eretz Yisrael. I guess there was something important about that they had to be all over, had to be Leviyim every place in Eretz Yisrael. And so we lost with the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash. We lost the Beit HaMikdash, and therefore the Leviyim didn't have an avodah in the Beit HaMikdash. But we also lost the Chalukah of Eretz Yisrael, right? We lost this division that existed between the people who inherited the land and the people who gave a small part of their inheritance to the Leviyim to make sure that the Leviyim would be able to live, to exist. So I'll read that halacha again. Shevet Levi, Avu Bishayin Lehem Chelek Ba'aretz, Ein Lehem Chelek Ba'aretz. This is a Gzeret HaKatuv. That's what God said. You don't give them a portion like a shevet. They're not a tribe in Eretz Yisrael. Kvar nitztavu Yisrael itein lehem arim lashevet. But there's another mitzvah that Bnei Yisrael received, that the Levium should get cities, Arim Lashevet, or Migrishehem, and their courts, right? The courts that go with houses, the buildings and the cities that they get. The Arim Miklat, and they should get refuge cities. Valehem Shnayim V'Arba'im Ir, and that would give them another 42 towns that they could live in. Ukesher Mosifin Arim Miklat Acherot B'Yemei HaMashiach Hakol HaLeviyim. And we don't have it now, but eventually the Mashiach will come, will straighten it out, and they'll get the places that are theirs, they'll get them back. Okay, but we don't have that. We don't have that kind of division. I take it personally because I am also a Levi. So where's my city? where it's interesting. It's interesting that when you look at history, it's difficult to understand the book of Kohanim and Leviim. The book of Kohanim and Leviim is not represented in our lifetimes. It means a fifth of the Torah, maybe more than a fifth of Torah Shabbat of Vayikra is very, very great. And so we're missing a lot. So now let's look at the Rambam, the same perek, but Halacha Yud Gimel. You see Halacha Yud Gimel? Halacha Yud Gimel. V'lo Shevet Levi Bilvad. V'lo Shevet Levi Bilvad. This is not only Shevet Levi. What is not only Shevet Levi? The Shevet Levi can be the way they should be. They should be devoted to Torah learning. Look at the Rambam says, "V'lo Shevet Levi bilvad." Ella, not only Shevet Levi is going to be involved in Torah study uniquely, Ella kol ish ve'ish mikol ba'ei ha'olam asher nidva rucho oto והבינו מדוע להיבדל לעמוד לפני לשרת ולעובדו לדעת את השם, והלך ישר כמו שעשהו האלוקים, ופרק מעל צוואת ולא. But in any event, the Rambam goes on, Harezen Nitkadesh Kodem Kodesh Kodashim V'yeh Hashem Chelek V'nachala La'olam U'la'olmei Olamim. So the Rambam then goes on to discuss, to say that, well, it's obvious, like something's obvious. Like what's obvious? That being a Levi is not necessarily a biological subdivision, and the fact that that Levium have no particular privileges, and certainly not today. There are no privileges. Even the privileges of the Kohen do not apply to the Levi. And the Kohen, who is not able to come into contact with the dead and to even serve them, unless it's a very special occasion, the Leviim have no such limitation. There's nothing that, but the Rambam creates a category. And the category is called, if you look at Halacha Yud Gimel, the category is called V'lo Shevet Levi Bilvad. V'lo Shevet Levi Bilvad. The Rambam created a new world. You know, whatever the Torah says about Shevet Levi, it doesn't only apply to Shevet Levi. It applies to anybody who wants to be that way. Lo shevet Levi bilvad, ela kol ish ve'ish mikol ba'ei ha'olam, any person from any place in the world, asher nadvar rucho, who decided on his own, his spirit moved him, asher nadvar rucho oto vehevino מדעו להיבדל לעמוד, he decided להיבדל לעמוד לפני לשירותו ולעובדו לדעה את Hashem. He decided that he wants to be a servant of God. Because not everybody in the world is a servant of God, but some people, the Spirit moves them, as they say. They become determined that their lives will be the life of being a servant of God. In other words, they are the way the Rambam described the Leviim, that a person can decide to become a Levi. And if he decides to get a Levi, he says, Lisharetu la'ovdo leda'at et Hashem v'alach yashar kimo sha'asau ha'elokim uparak me'al tzavaro ol ha'cheshbonot harabim asher bikesh. If a person could decide that he wants to be in the world that is properly part of God's world, and we all can fool ourselves into thinking that we're special and that we are appreciated in heaven. But for most people, this is not the case. I mean, most people find the weight of reality to be problematic, difficult. But here and there, we see a person who says, no, I'm not going to be stymied by that. I'm going to continue. I'm going to become. So along comes the Rambam, and the Rambam says, okay, you're a Levi. You decided to become a Levi. Because Levi is not a biological category, according to this halakha of the Rambam. But Levi is not a biological. It's not because your father was a Levi that you're a Levi. But if you want to be one of the people who serves God in a more tangible way, in a way that is more spiritually inclined. If you want to be one of those people, you can be one of those people. And not only that, just like the Levi in the Torah was released of pragmatic kind of matters. He didn't have a nachala, but he had a place to live. He didn't have a achuzah, but he had food to eat. Somehow it was worked out that the Am Yisrael needed those people. We needed them. And the only way we could get them was by making sure they would be able to live reasonable lives and support their attraction to being part of the heavenly core. The heavenly core. These are the people who decided on their own. That's what the Rambam says, that they want to be Leviim. And so what do we say to them? Vakasha, you can be Leviim. You can be Leviim. So that in the course of history, I mean, the Rambam was like 1,000 years, more than 1,000 years after Matan Torah. And the people learned in that time, in that period of time, they learned that the Torah lives on. Even if reality seems to stymie the desire of the Torah. I mean, after all, galut, exile, means no connection to Yerushalayim, no connection to the Beit HaMikdash, no connection to Korbanot. I mean, that's what exile is. Exile is not just moving from one territory to another. Exile is kind of the inability to do what you want to do, what you're supposed to do. That's what exile really is. Remember that Rav Nachman said that an interesting discussion. Rav Nachman said, exile is where you can't daven. You can't daven. I mean, I know today that seems to us to be a strange thing to say, but he said it, that he knew about the exile. It could be, Rav Nachman said, exile is where you can't daven. So I guess you could say that. That means that maybe even someplace in Eretz Yisrael are a kind of exile. But he continues to say that's because in exile, it's hard to have faith. Faith is a word which might be described as, or translated as trust. We know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu promised Am Yisrael certain things, promised through the agency of Avram Avinu and Yitzchak and Yaakov. There were promises. So exile is sometimes necessary, apparently, but is not part of the promise. It's not that exile was promised. Okay, I know the Parshiot of Bechukotai and Kitavo have to be understood. But Rav Nachman says that there's no, because we find it difficult to be in exile, not because we're oppressed, but because it's not in accordance with the divine promise. The promise was that we get to Eretz Yisrael and we'd be there. We build a Beit HaMikdash, we change the world. Exile makes us feel as though the promise of HaKadosh Baruch Hu has been restated in some way, no longer effective. And because of that, we don't have trust. We weak. Our trust in the future is weakened. And if we don't have that kind of trust that HaKadosh Baruch Hu fulfilling his obligation, so to speak, we don't have that trust. I mean, how can we daven? What are we davening for? So Rav Nachman says that that's a problem. Exile, diaspora is a problem. Problem of what? Problem of tefillah. Problem of emunah. Emunah is trust. So Am Yisrael had this problem. I mean, what do you deal with the fact? How do you deal with that fact that this is in two ways? One has to do with korbanot, and the other has to do with kohanim and Leviim. So what did we do about the korbanot? What did we do about the korbanot? We had this wonderful idea that if you learn the Torah of the korbanot, it's as though you brought the korbanot. You imagine that? That's what it says in the davening. We daven in the morning. We start off the davening with the korbanot because it's important for us to recognize the fact that korbanot, that saying the Torah, that reading the words of the Torah, that understanding the Torah Shebaal Peh, that those things are real. That's the real world that you could live in if you just grab hold of it. And the Leviim, who were charged with learning Torah and teaching Torah, everybody can become one of the B'nai Levi. everybody can join and become a Levi.
Rabbi,
I mean,
did the
not only can they do that today, but they can even demand support. The community will support them. And this was the Uparak me al tzavaro ol ha-cheshbonot harabim asher biksha b'nei ha'adam. All the things that you have to get. I mean, you can't learn full time if you don't have any money. So the community is obliged to give the money. That's always seemed to me to be maybe
Rabbi,
it could be a little more. Yeah,
did the Levium go with their families?
they lived in cities. Yeah, they lived like regular people, but they had to go from time to time to the Beit HaMikdash. They sang. They helped. In general, they protected the Beit HaMikdash.
But then they didn't go with their
No,
families to the Beit
no, they did
HaMikdash.
not. Well, the families could come, like all the Jews could come on the Shalosh Regalim, and other times everybody could come. They didn't come because they were B'nai Levi. They came because they had to come to the Beit HaMikdash. So that these people, the people who the Rambam says want to become B'nai Levi, are the people who are going to join, and so they should have the same condition to B'nai Levi. The B'nai Levi received cities and support from Am Yisrael so that they would sit and learn Torah in greater intensity than the rest of the people. The same thing is true, but people who want to become part of B'nai Levi, that's the Rambam. People want to become, will be fulfilling what the Torah said. So this is what I want you to understand. That these principles, the principle that says that the words are the reality, saying the korbanot is like bringing the korbanot. Doing what the B'nai Levi wanted to do is totally like doing it, like you've done it, you've been there. And just as B'nai Levi is well known to be a group within a larger group, the people who want to become part of B'nai Levi are also the smaller group within a larger group, which I find particularly interesting that we have at least convinced ourselves, or we imagine that our responsibility to the demands of the Torah have been fulfilled. And that this halacha in the Rambam, halacha Yud Gimel, which is a well-known halacha, and the idea that the B'nai Levi are duplicatable, that anybody can become one of the B'nai Levi, and then when you become one of the B'nai Levi, you deserve the support of the larger community because they're helpful in what they're doing. So again, the parashas of Vayikra sometimes are a little bit unreasonable from my way of thinking. I don't do those things. I don't involve myself in those things. I'm not a Kohen, and I am a Levi, but I'm not able to do what Leviim usually did at the time of the Beit HaMikdash. And yet, in some way, I'm enjoying to feel that I am doing it, that I am part of that learning the halachot of the Beit HaMikdash, for example, is a reasonable thing to do. It's not esoterica. It's not something that doesn't affect me because I want it to affect me. I'd like it to. I would say that the Rambam says there are people who want to join the B'nai Levi, so great, that sort of would encourage the people who are B'nai Levi to do better and better. And that's what the book of Vayikra is largely about. Okay. Have a wonderful Shabbos. Be well.
Thank you, Rabbi Brovender.